Dr. Sharp, Mr. Wiles, please report to the office. Now!
Welcome to another edition of From the Principal's Desk with Mr. Dennis Wiles and Dr. Chris Sharp. Well, we're back again with another episode. Dennis, how are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, Sharp. How are you doing today?
Well, it's been a hard couple of weeks. This distance learning and all this stuff's been a little bit difficult, but we're pulling through. Kind of let everybody know where we're at. We've had our governor suggest school closures, as many have. For anybody who's facing that same situation, my prayers are with you because this is uncharted territory.
Yeah, and it's heartbreaking for teachers. It's heartbreaking for those teachers who didn't get to say goodbye to their kids, and we've got to figure out ways to get personal items back to these kids because, we went on spring break the week before we were shut down. So we weren't really able to prepare the way most schools probably were.
Yeah. And it's little things that kids are going to miss out on and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. But those things that are important to parents and students, I feel bad for high school seniors especially, but where our schools are changing next year, I've got 3 grade levels of kids, actually 4 if you count 5th grade, that we're not going to see again in the classroom. And that's it's a little heartbreaking. My son's a 5th grader going to middle school, and he's having a hard time with it.
Sure, I can understand that. And a lot of kids are, they've walked the halls of their schools, some of them for the last time. They'll be in new schools next year, middle schools or seniors going to college. Hopefully things will settle down this summer and our seniors can at least get a graduation and hopefully a prom. It'll be good for them. They deserve that. They've worked hard for many years in school and they deserve that.
I agree. Well, let's focus on, something positive.
Yeah.
Talking about, well, you and I were talking yesterday, and you had put out a blog, kind of out of your normal order, and I'll be honest, after I read it took me a couple of days. I was like, this is what our show should be. We kind of discussed it. It's about the little things. So, kind of walk us through what you were discussing in your blog and the importance of those little things, because this is something that may raise some spirits out there.
Yeah, just when we were doing our talking the temperature check and the culture building and assessment and things like that in your schools, one area that I like to focus on that oftentimes as a school leader, you forget to focus on, but it's just don't forget the little things. Sometimes we get so caught up and we forget to do the little things. Schools are extremely busy organizations. And as school leaders, man, we tackle so many tasks on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. I mean, just think about your day from the moment you get out of your car in the parking lot. I mean, if you're like me, I don't know if you're like me, sometimes I get out of the car in the parking lot and I've got parents in the parking lot hollering my name.
Yep.
So I go over and I talk to them and I listen to them and I let them know, hey, I'll check into it. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Then I come inside. People are in the office. You're trying to get your morning announcements ready. You're trying to help with morning duty in the cafeteria and bus duty in the gym or the hallways, and then your day starts and you've got observations planned, teacher observations, and then you want to score those observations and plan post conferences, and you have student discipline going on, and you have to check your email, and you have to take parent calls, and you have an IEP meetings. I mean, there's so much, and man, don't get me wrong. I love every minute of it. I love what I do. There's no monotony to my day. I love it. But it oftentimes we're very busy. And I say all that to get to the point to where it's easy to get focused and develop tunnel vision on those things and forget to do the little things throughout the day.
And that, I'm just like you. I walk in the door. I always joke with my wife, if I get 10 feet in the door without having somebody yell my name, it may be a good day. But, the problems start at 7:15. And parents come in the office, they don't understand. There's no appointments. I don't take appointments unless they call me and say it. If a parent comes in and says I need to talk to you, they get my time. I'd rather deal with it and
Mhm.
have that conversation now than put it off 2 days and let them stew on it.
Sure. If
But
my door's open, my appointment book's open. That's my appointments. If my door's open,
that's it.
I'm open.
And I try never to. And only time I close my doors when I'm having private conversations.
Exactly.
But I think the thing about it is, and maybe it's because, I was a kid, grew up before ADHD was a thing, but I'm sure I would have qualified. I love my job simply because it's always something different. You
Hmm.
never know when something's going to pop up. And I get tunnel visioned a lot of times on the task at hand.
Hmm.
And, when you start talking about those little things, it's like I had to sit there and say, I let those get away from me because those big, that discipline issue, the fight you had in a locker room, or somebody's made a mess in the bathroom, or you got a teacher who's done something that they shouldn't. Nothing major, but it consumes your day. And in all honesty, a lot of times we don't see a lot of positive
Hmm.
in our jobs. People don't realize that. We don't see the little wins, the things that make teachers, kind of brighten their day. We may not see that. We get the discipline, we get the phone calls, we get the complaints. So I think focusing on those little things helps you not to be consumed by negativity. It gives
Sure.
you a chance to be the shining light, and that's what I really loved about what you were talking about. So let's kind of, let's talk about it. Walk me through what you're doing in your school, because I was inspired when I read your blog of things that I need to be doing, and I had to think about what do I do to, instead.
Sure, man. Little things to me are just those invaluable actions that you do to show others how much you appreciate them and you care for them. And it kind of helps keep me grounded, and if I try to make sure that I remember to do those little things and make sure that I do spend some time focusing on doing those little things for my teachers and my students. It's important for teachers and students to receive those little things throughout the school year. So like you said, we get this tunnel vision on these big projects or these initiatives that we're working on that sometimes get, that just come down the pipe to us, and it's a tall task, and it may take a lot of time, and we get all invested in completing that project. Sometimes we get so invested that we forget the people that are keeping everything running smoothly while we're
Mhm.
working on those things. And those people, so they need a pat on the back. They need some positivity. They need to know that you appreciate what they're doing. You
Right.
know, and I forget to do that sometimes, man. Sometimes it so easily, gets pushed to the side because we're so focused on all these multitude of things that we face on a daily basis. So I just try to make time. I try to make, if I have to leave a note, sometimes I think about it when I'm driving home. I'll put
Mhm.
a reminder in my calendar for the next day to go off at a certain time. Hey, remember the little things. Or I'll put a note on my door or on my desk. Hey, remember the little things every now and then, just to keep me from forgetting to do those things. And am I perfect in those? No. I sometimes I'll go several, weeks without doing something, and then it'll hit me, and it's like, oh yeah, man, I really need to focus on the little things. I need to get that back in the forefront of my mind and start making those a priority. And there's so many different ways that you can do that in a school as a school leader.
Well, and a lot of times when people think about, I don't want to say reward, but positive reinforcement, they start thinking about money, spending money. The things that you've mentioned for the most part are free.
Sure. Yeah,
You
they,
know,
they don't I don't spend a lot of money on this. This is not something that I spend a lot of money on. We do spend a little money every now and then. Well,
sure.
I don't. My booster club does. They help me out a lot. But I try to use things that are that don't cost money,
Right.
and it kind of goes back. I remember when I was teaching sixth grade, maybe my first or second year teaching. I'm standing in front of class and I'm teaching, and my principal knocks on the door and just sticks his head in the door. And my immediate thought, because I'm young, I'm a young
Mm.
teacher, and I'm like, oh goodness, what have I done? Or what have one of my students done? And he said, I'm sorry to interrupt. And he just gave me the thumbs up. He said, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want you to know, man, you're doing a great job and I appreciate you.
Yeah.
And then he left. And my kids just kind of turned and looked at me, and I felt great inside. And I was
Mhm.
just, man, that's awesome. That gave me a really good feeling to know that, he appreciated and noticed what I was doing.
I had a similar experience when my first year, I was really struggling, um, middle school, teaching all three grade levels in related arts when I started.
Hmm.
And, the assistant principal kind of pulled me to the side and he said, I just want you to know we got a good one.
Hmm.
What you're doing is great. We appreciate you being here. And that made me, that was the statement I needed on that day, because I'll be honest, I was probably questioning my career choices at that point because that eighth grade class was wearing me out.
Yeah.
But, little things like that, you know, so Dennis, let's get some hard examples. I think we could go through all the stakeholders fairly quickly and give some good examples for an administrator to walk away with today. So let's start with your teachers. What are you doing in your school to kind of the little things you're doing to build positivity?
Sure. A lot of times I really like to start with my teachers when I'm thinking about little things. They're the first group of stakeholders that comes to my mind because they're in the trenches. They're on the front lines, and I really want them to know that I appreciate what they do. So some things that we've done, and actually some things that we're talking about now that we're actually going to start doing a little more of and a little better job of. Number one is just to recognize teacher accomplishments, during meetings, maybe on our social media sites, because I've got some teachers that do some great things. They've applied for state positions to be on these teams, these standards committees and testing committees and things like that. And it's an honor to be selected for those things. Well, in the last year and a half, I've had two teachers to be selected on those committees, and I failed to recognize them. I
Mm-hmm.
congratulated them personally, but I don't know how many people in the building knew how hard they worked and that they had actually been chosen by the state to represent our school and our district and to be on those teams. So I need to do a little better job of recognizing teacher accomplishments, in meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Something else that we did start doing this year that our teachers actually loved was I just got the idea to start sending a snack cart around, a teacher snack cart, about once every 4 to 6 weeks. I got with my booster club president, asked her if she'd help me fund it. She was on board. I sent a Google form out through email, asked teachers, what's your favorite snack? What's your favorite drink? A healthy snack, an unhealthy snack, a sweet treat. I
Mm-hmm.
used that feedback. We bought some items, put on the cart to try to make sure there's something on there something on there that everyone liked. We send that cart around, rolled around, just knock on teachers' door, let them come get a drink and a snack. And, the smile on their face, the appreciation they
Mm-hmm.
showed. Something else that I've done for several years. I'll do it a few times a year. One thing I'd like to do is start doing it routinely throughout the year is, when you do these little 5 or 10 minute drop ins in classrooms, just to drop
Mm-hmm.
in and visit the class, it's just to leave positive notes for the teacher. I took cardstock. I made these little postcard size notes that have our bear claw on one side, and that's all that's there. And the other side's blank. I try to carry those with me when I go. And while I'm sitting there, I'll just write a sentence or a short paragraph, just to let the teacher know, hey, you're doing a great job. I really like the way you're doing
Mm-hmm.
this, to find something positive. And I just leave that laying on their desk and I get up and leave. So
That
those are a few strategies that I use for my teachers.
well, and I need to be better about those notes. I like your idea about the snack cart. I'm a big believer in, if you're going to praise often. You
Yeah.
know, I've run into the problem in the past. I've been in faculties and, I've been a part of faculties where praise isn't given out very often. And when it happens, jealousy starts coming up. They're like, oh, well, that's the teacher's pet. No, just like we've talked in previous podcasts, there's always something positive to find in your people. You got to look for the talent. if find something to brag on those teachers about. Most times it's not hard, you know. And I'm a big attaboy, just pull them to the side and say, listen, I want you to know I appreciate everything you do, you know, and I appreciate you did this, and or I saw you working with that student by himself. That means a lot to him. One thing I'm big on with my teachers is laughing with them, having a sense of humor, showing them you're human. You know, when I first started in the principalship, I assumed what a principal should act like. I mimicked other principals that I'd had, and some of them were very stoic. Some of them were very standoffish, and that's okay. If that's your personality. That's not my personality. So I was pretending to be something I wasn't.
Sure.
But once I got into it and started joking around with them, learning about their interests, talking to them like a human being, like a colleague, not a manager, if you will, it built up that relationship. And now I've got Zoom meetings this afternoon with my staff, and I'm looking forward to it because we'll sit and cut up and laugh, but we'll get our work done.
Sure. And, you said something there talking about getting to know your staff and talking with them. And, it kind of reminded me also when you're thinking about this, especially recognizing teacher accomplishments, it's good to know your staff because, it's good to know who needs that and who thrives on that and builds on that. But also you've got your staff members, you've got different personalities. Some people are very, very humble, and they would rather you do that privately.
Sure.
It kind of like when my principal come and just knocked on my door. He didn't do that in a faculty meeting. Honestly, with my personality, it wouldn't have bothered me either way.
Right.
I appreciate it either way. But I can think of 2 or 3 faculty members that I have that would rather me not do that publicly, but they would appreciate it privately if I just kind of came in during their planning period and sat down and say, hey, I just want to let you know I appreciate what you do. You do a great job. That's a little thing. They need that. Everybody, like you said, everybody needs an attaboy, whether it's publicly or privately, and that's where it's important to get to know your staff and to know and understand their personalities.
Well, and I use example. One of the things I like to do the most, and this was a game changer. I heard Jerry Brooks, you and I had seen him at the title conference.
Sure.
This was a game changer for me for getting to know my staff a little bit better. Candy dish, cheap, little glass candy dish, $5 worth of candy, good candy. I put on my desk. Now my desk became a place where people came to, and that's where I could give that positive feedback. I could talk to them for a minute, 2 minutes. It's enough time for them to say, hey, can I have a piece of candy? Sure, go ahead. Hey, I appreciate what I saw in there. You were teaching the heck out of that math standard, or you're working with that kid, or thank you for, dealing with that discipline issue. Those are to me, that is a great opportunity for little things.
Yeah, and like you, I did the same thing. I come back, I had a little basket laying around. I put it on a table in my office, right across from my desk, and put some chocolate in there. And, the next thing you know, I've got people standing around my table in my office, and that doesn't bother me one bit. That's what I put it there for,
Right.
So they come in, it gives me an opportunity to chat with teachers and for them to talk to me and ask me questions. And those are perfect opportunities to insert these little things, to insert a positive comment or recognize an accomplishment for a teacher.
Well, let's move on. Let's talk about our students, because that's the second part of this that we really need to focus on, and probably it's equally as important. So tell me, what are you doing for your students? Because you've talked about the house system you're getting ready to implement. Tell me some about that. Tell me about your little things.
Yeah, well, it's very important for students to recognize them. They want the attaboy too. They want to be recognized. They want to feel appreciated and loved. So one thing that we started doing this year is to recognize student achievements on video announcements. I started doing morning announcements via video. I would make a short video each morning to recognize students of the day and birthdays, and put our lunch menu and everything on it. And one segment of their morning announcements, that video announcement that gets sent out every morning to our homeroom teachers, is student celebrations. And teachers they email me a student's name and what they would like for them to be recognized for, whether they become a math master, or they mastered all their fry words or sight words, or whatever the celebration may be. And then I'll put that student's name and what they did on that video, and that becomes part of the morning announcements, and that goes out school wide. So
I love it.
Yeah, so we started recognizing student accomplishments as well, via video announcements. We've got, a couple times a year, we've got a local ice cream shop here in town. We get them to come out, and our booster club will pay, and our kids get to come down and get ice cream. They'll bring up multiple flavors. Kids get to choose what flavor they want, and they get free ice cream. They love that. We do snow cone days where we give students snow cones. We just try to do little things. It's school. Yeah, we learn, and our kids work hard, and we want to do little things where we can to give them little treats to let them know how much we appreciate them. We even do movie days. We'll take maybe the day before spring break, or the day before we leave for Christmas break, or these certain days that you're probably not introducing a new lesson, and the teacher's already wrapped up an ongoing. Right. Unit. So we try to choose those days for those movie days where we let kids come down, and we've got a theater screen, and we pick a movie off of, Netflix or Disney Plus, and we show a movie for our kids, and they really appreciate and they look forward to those days. You see a lot of smiles on those days.
Yeah.
And we get so caught up in the academic side of it that we forget we've got to provide these experiences for kids too at school, to these social experiences, and just to build the smiles, because they don't get that at home. Some of my kids don't have cable.
Right. Well, and I'm a big advocate, and I talk with my teachers a lot of times. Never forget we're dealing with children. They're not small adults. They need to be kids too.
Sure.
And oftentimes we'll set up days just like what you're discussing. They'll have an outside day. They'll go play basketball or something like that, extra time on the playground, whatever it is. And I'll have teachers come and say, well, I want to keep Johnny out of that. Mm-hmm. He hadn't been a good boy. Mm-hmm. And I always, I debate that with them and say, has he ever got to do that in the past? Well, no. Well, if he doesn't know what the reward feels like, if he doesn't get to experience it, it's an unattainable goal. He doesn't know what he's missing. So let him go. And that way, maybe that will inspire him, that positive reinforcement.
Sure.
I'm a big one on bragging on your kids. I've told you I do lunch duty every day, not because I have to, because I want to. Mm-hmm. And what I'll do is, I take time to talk with my kids, ask them about, if they're in a sport, if they play sports, I'll ask them about how they play, how they performed or how practice is going. If they're into band or they're into theater, I've got one that's into dance. He'll show me his dance. If I ask him to, he'll stand in the cafeteria and dance for me. But it's showing that I'm invested in you. And, I put in my notes about getting to know your kids more than test scores. Mm-hmm. I've been that guy where I had all my kids and they were highlighted, red, yellow, orange, green, or whatever the color combination.
Bubble kids. Who's my bubble?
Bubble kids. And you focused on those, and those kids are more than those scores. I will talk to kids about their scores. And normally if I do it, I'm talking a child that's made huge gains. I'll look at their, benchmark and say, hey, you know what? I saw you took your benchmark earlier today and you jumped, 25 points. I'm really proud of you. Mm-hmm. And for them to know that I'm looking made them feel good. But I think as educators, we've got to remember that you can't just use those scores as, defining those kids.
Yeah, I agree. Kids, that's something that we've kind of got away from. And you get on Twitter and you follow, if you're like me, I follow educators and authors all over the country. And, you see these questions get popped up all the time. If you could change one or two things about public education, what would it be? You know what the number one thing is? Get rid of standardized testing, because kids are more than a score. And I
Sure.
agree with that. I agree with that 110%. But as a public educator, I also understand that right now, we have to play the game. We have to,
Sure.
we have to, we do our best to help kids grow and to receive positive scores, but they are more than just a score. So I agree 110%.
Well, and I want to add one little thing. A lot of times, the kids that we in our position get to know the best are normally the ones that can get in trouble. They spend a lot of time in our office.
Yes.
I joke with, I'll joke with my teacher sometimes, that boy doesn't want me to learn his name. It's like, because if I know your name, it's not a good thing. I know my kid's name. Okay. That's a joke. But even when you have kids that misbehave, even when you have kids that have bad behavior, and you're going to have to call that parent, take a second, find something, just like we were talking about with that teacher, find something that you could brag on that kid about. It doesn't have to be dropping the hammer on them. There has to be something good that you can talk to them about. Even if they tied their shoe the right way, brag on them about that, so they know I'm not doing this to be mean. I'm doing this because I care about you. And that's the way I look at discipline is, I'm not doing it because I want to, be the hard, nose guy. I'm doing it because I want you to learn to be better. And I think that's part of it.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, man, that leads kind of right into the next segment. Here, my next thing I focus on. We talked about teachers. How strategies for doing the little things for teachers, for doing the little things for students, and my next one is just for everyone. My whole school. One thing I do every day for my whole school, and this is something that I do every day because I don't want to forget it. It's one of those important little things to me, is I say I love you every single day. That's how I end my morning announcements. I say I love each and every one of you. Let's have a great day. And I do that for a multitude of reasons. Number one is I do care about them. I do love them, and I do want them to have a great day. As educators, we wouldn't do what we do if we didn't love our students. And if you don't, then you need to get out of education.
Amen.
But I say I love you every single day, and I do that for multiple reasons. Number one, I want them to hear those words from at least one person every day or 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. They're going to hear it from me. I want them to know that somebody loves them and somebody cares about them, and that's my students and my teachers, and number two is I always try to keep in the forefront of my mind, we don't always know the situation that these students come to us from every single day. We don't know what they went through, when they got up, or, what they're living through at home, or what happened at home when they got up at 6:30 a.m. and they got on the bus at 7:45 or 7:30. We don't know what happened, maybe they got in a fight with their parents. Maybe they, didn't eat breakfast. Maybe they were freezing to death. We don't know what happened. So I always try to keep that in the forefront of my mind, as I want to start them off on a positive note. I want them to hear I love you, and I want to start them off on a positive note. And that also helps, Chris. You're talking about when you're disciplining a kid, when they know, when you were talking about talking to those parents or talking to those kids, and when they know that you love them and they know that you care about them, when the parents know that you love them and they know that you care about them, it really helps when you do have to do those discipline things or have to have those crucial, tough, serious conversations. Because a lot of times I ask them, the kid's sitting across from me, and, I'll ask them, hey, what's the last thing I say to you every morning on the morning announcements? And they'll say that you love us. And I say, that's exactly right. And I do. But with love comes discipline. And I'm correcting you, and I'm talking to you about this because I love you and I want you to do better, and I expect better from you. And that helps that whole conversation. That's a little thing that has a huge impact, for that kid and for me. You know,
Hmm.
as an administrator, you know, it helps those conversations so much. Even when you're talking to parents, they know you love their kid. They know you care about them, you know, and they know that I want the best for them. So when I have those conversations, you know, 99% of the time, they end up going smoothly and have a positive outcome.
Sure. And I don't say it every day on the morning announcements. I I've, the kids have learned. I have a saying. I say, "Go Hornets" with every call I make, and that's kind of the parents joke about it, the teachers joke about it, the kids joke about it, because that's kind of we're all in this together. We're all one family. Go Hornets. But I couldn't count how many times, even in a week, I look at a kid and I'll come up and I'll tell you, I want you to know I love you,
Sure.
or when I'm doing discipline, I'll tell them, I'll say, listen, I'm doing this because I care about you. I love you. I want you. You are like one of my children, you know, and I know that people who aren't in education may not understand that, but our students do become like our children, and I want the best for them. And that comes with responsibility too. I expect a certain level of discipline and responsibility out of my children. I expect it out of my students.
Hmm.
But once they know, the old saying, and we've used it here before, they don't care what you know until they know how much you care.
Hmm.
That's a big thing. And I'll tell you this, I use when I'm talking with parents, with students, you know, I don't hold back. I'll tell them, I wasn't a straight A student in school. I'll tell them I struggled with this, and maybe I got in some trouble in school. Not because I'm bragging or I'm trying to bore them to death. It's like I want them to understand. Listen, I've been in your situation. You know, I remember. My family wasn't what I would consider poor or underprivileged, but we struggled at times. I started working when I was 12.
Hmm.
I work construction from 12 on up. When I tell kids that, it's like, listen, if you've worked construction, you understand what hard work's like. I want better for you. If you want it and you want to do something different, let me show you how to get out of that. Or let me show you, if you're, worried about money or worried about eating, let me help you because I've been there in some way, shape, or form. So,
Yeah, and
I,
and and a lot of times, Chris, what you're talking about there is being transparent.
mhm.
You know, and there's a lot to be gained. You know, if you do it carefully and you do it um, if you do it the right way, there's a lot to be gained through that transparency. You know, because you're
Mhm.
putting yourself on somebody else's level. You know, so yeah, I use transparency a lot. You know, with not so much with students a lot of times, but with my faculty a lot of times. And I've talked about that in previous podcasts and wrote about it in a blog. I'm very transparent with my faculty as far as how I was as a teacher and the scores I received and and things like that. And you can use that if used the right way. There's a lot to be gained there.
Well, and I think you said it. It has to be the right way. You don't share things that are inappropriate. You don't share things that don't need. But if I'm talking to a student about his grades,
Hmm.
I'll tell him, listen, I struggled. There's not anything that you could do in terms of discipline that either one, I haven't done, or two, thought about doing. So there's, I get it. But that's I want them to understand that you too, just because you're struggling now, doesn't mean that the struggle lasts forever. You know, so I think that's an important, and those are little conversations that make huge impacts. I know I had teachers who did that for me. I want to do that for my kids too.
Sure. All right, Chris. Let's talk about, before we start wrapping this up, there's a few important things here that, when you're talking about little things, we've talked about strategies here
Mhm.
for teachers and for students and for everyone, as far as school wide. Um, as we start to wrap this up, there's a few key points here that I want to put out there. Number one, don't, as an administrator and as a school leader, it's very important. Don't let little things get put on the back burner. We talked about that earlier in our podcast. It's easy to get tunnel vision and to focus on these huge initiatives, major projects that's going on. Don't let the little things get put on the back burner. If you have to put post-it notes on your desk or reminders in your phone, like I do, make sure you do those things. Okay, make sure you take time out a few times a week to do those little things. Okay, because those little things sometimes can make the biggest impacts in your school.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing that I want to say, and I'm talking to myself here, I'm preaching to the choir 110%, and my wife will tell you, don't don't just practice this at school. It's important to remember the little things at home. You know, I don't do a great. I'm being transparent here. I don't do the greatest job with this. You know, this is a conversation my wife and I have a lot of times, and sometimes I don't like to hear it. To be honest, but it's 100% spot on. I'll remember to do these things at work because I feel like it's so important. That's my career. That's what pays the bills. Um, but I wouldn't be successful in what I do if I didn't have the support at home. So it's important to keep that balance by focusing on little things at home too. Don't forget your spouses. Don't forget your kids. Take time today to do something, or to say something. It's the little things. If it can have a big impact at school, it can have a big impact in your home.
I I 100% agree. And you and I have had this conversation a couple times. I'm the same way. I get wound tight, especially when something big's going on. And my kids go to my school, so I'm principal dad, and sometimes it's hard for me to distinguish being dad and being principal. And
Mhm.
that's I have to make that division. And the other thing I struggled with personally, my wife, she's not in my school too often because she works full-time job.
Mhm.
She's there for after school events and things like that. I had to keep in the back of my mind because I started seeing her attitude towards my school. Uh, it took a negative turn because what I was giving, when I came home, what do you talk about when you go home 90% of the time? Talk about
Things
the
that are
bad.
bothering you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's your spouse. It's the person that you use for support. Well, all she was hearing was negative. She didn't hear the other, 100 things during that day that went right. She heard that one or two things that went wrong, and it was affecting her view not only of my profession but of my school.
Mhm.
So, you know, I had to take a different approach and remember that, hey, you know, I got to be a husband, and I can't sit here and do this all the time and expect her to support me and love my school the way I love my school. So I had to censor myself in a lot of ways,
Sure.
and you and I go back and forth about problems we have, and that's a great, finding somebody outside of your spouse to unload on. A lot of times is a lot. It's going to make a difference in your home life. I'll tell you, it's made a difference in mine.
Yeah, that's why you and I share a lot. In the last several months, once we come up with the plan to start blogging and start our blog site and podcasting or video casting, whatever you want to call this, we've started sharing a lot. And it's helped to be able to talk things out and put things out there, and it's good to know that other school leaders, deal with the same things I do. That's one reason we started this podcast, because we want to reach out to other school leaders. So if you're a school leader and you're listening and you feel what we're saying, make sure you let us know. And Sharp, as we close this out, I think it's your turn this week to share a book. I know you've probably got a book on deck there that you've been reading or just finished recently. Why don't you share a good book with us this week?
What I mentioned this in the last podcast. I want to share it with everybody again because I didn't do a very good job reviewing it. I just brought it up. This is one I read. It's called Juggling Elephants by Jones Laughlin.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very short read. Um, I read it. I think it took an hour, maybe two, to finish that book. Um, the good thing about this, it is a narrative. It's written, kind of storytelling, very you would see Ken Blanchard uses that format a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, um, and it talks about it uses the circus as a kind of how to frame, dealing with stress within an organization, with changes, maximizing the talent you have within it. And I don't know if you know this or not. years ago, when I was in high school, I was a clown. I was I was actually trained.
You learn something every day.
Well, I actually had the opportunity. I trained with 3 Hall of Fame Ringling Brother clowns. So, my goal getting out of high school was to go join the circus. Unfortunately, the clown school closed the year I graduated, so I missed that opportunity.
I bet that broke your parents' heart.
Well, believe it or not, my parents were very supportive of it.
So you got some great parents.
But I've always been kind of infatuated with the circus, and knowing those boss clowns, I knew a little bit of this, and it's a great read. You don't have to be a circus guy. This will hit home with anybody, and I think it's got a good message for school leaders that we are in a circus. It's a 3-ring circus every day, and that goes right back to what we started with. You can't focus on one ring and forget the other 3 rings. You got to be able to maintain all 3 rings all the time. And that takes planning. That takes, being able to let go a little bit and not being hyper focused. So Juggling Elephants is my book for the week.
Good deal. I like those short reads. I'll have to check it out.
Hey, I'm all about the short read. I can't do those, those thick Sergio Vani books put me to sleep.
Good deal, Sharp. Well, hey, man, listen, things are crazy right now with COVID-19. I hope you and your family stay safe. We hope our listeners and our followers are safe and healthy. Guys, make sure you reach out to us. Give us some feedback if you're listening. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Facebook. You can catch our podcasts now on iTunes. We're on Spotify. Where else we at, Sharp?
iHeartRadio should be up within the end of the week. Google Podcasts should be up. We've got several platforms
Castbox
that we're out on. Castbox. We're on Castbox now. And, check out that Facebook. Make sure you're checking out our blog site. Guys and gals, Dennis and I talk back and forth. Don't be an island to yourself. If you don't have support out there, and it's tough for all administrators and teachers right now, reach out to us. Let us be your support system, because that's why we're doing this. It's not just for he and I to talk. We're trying to be your support out there. So please reach out to us. We'll be your support team.
Good deal. Sharp, another great week. I enjoyed talking to you. Great job, man.
Hey, you too, brother. Hey, I'll tell you, just like I tell my kids, love you, brother.
Love you too. Love you too, man. Hey, Wild's out.
Hey, stay sharp, guys.